Good morning. My name is Alex Lindstrom. I'm a junior from Laurel, Mississippi, and I'm majoring in integrated marketing communications. And I'm in Dr. Husney's magazine journalism class. So it is my pleasure to introduce Liz Vaccariello. She is the editor-in-chief and chief content officer of Reader's Digest, a trusted Media Brands Inc. company and one of the world's largest media brands with more than 40 million readers and 53 million UVMs. She's responsible for driving editorial direction and product strategy across the brand's media platforms, including Reader's Digest, readersdigest.com, editions for the iPad, Nook, and Amazon Kindle, on which Reader's Digest is one of the best-selling magazines and books. A journalist with over 20 years' experience in health and nutrition, Liz brings decades of experience to her role at Reader's Digest as editor-in-chief and author. She is recognized as a trusted, authoritative speaker with deep expertise on issues such as health, food, and storytelling, among other areas. Liz's approach to a happy, well-rounded life fits well with the Reader's Digest brand promise to give people simple, proven solutions that inspire and improve their lives. She earned a BA in communications from the University of Michigan. Today, she lives in South Orange, New Jersey. She and her husband, Steve, a professional photographer, and they have 11-year-old twin daughters. So please give Liz a well-rounded applause.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Samir. I'm going to put my coffee down here. And like I said, I'm going to leave my Reader's Digests up here. Okay, so once upon a time, there was a girl in about 7th grade, and she was sitting in her bedroom in her childhood home in Lyndhurst, Ohio. And she was sitting at her desk, and she was about 11:30 at night, and she was writing with a pen an assignment for class. And she thought to herself how much she enjoyed rewriting those sentences and taking a new piece of paper and reading out loud the rhythm of the sentence and how the sentences strung together. And she enjoyed looking at the story and changing it around and seeing what kind of beginning and end made the most sense. And all of a sudden, her bedroom door opened, and in walked her dad. And her dad never came into her bedroom at night. Dad was, was an executive, and he always worked hard, and we didn't see much of Dad. But Dad came in, and he said, "Honey, you're up late, and you're doing homework. I'm so proud of you." And I said, and the girl said, "Dad, I think I just decided what I want to do for a living. I want to be a writer or an editor. I want to tell stories. I want to work with words." And he said, "Oh, honey, wow, it's a really early age to know what you want to do. Well, let's see how that turns out." So fast forward several decades. I always wanted to be a writer, became a magazine editor, and several decades later found myself tingling because I had just been offered the job to be the 10th editor-in-chief of Reader's Digest, a 93-year-old brand. And my dad had passed away about 3 years prior to that. And I remember the first person I texted was my sister, but the second person I texted was my mom, and told her the news. "Mom, they offered me the job." And she just wrote one sentence back and said, "Your father would be very proud." Now that story was my editor's letter, the first issue that I became editor of Reader's Digest. Because what I wanted to do, I had spent many years in service journalism, and I was finally at a place where I could tell stories, where I could flatten, I had been at Prevention Magazine and I had flattened many bellies, but I was going to flatten some bellies at Reader's Digest too. I was going to make people healthy, but I was going back to my journalism roots. I was going back to that storytelling, and I wanted the magazine. It had never, DeWitt Wallace himself had very rarely written an editor's letter, and what I wanted to do was start the magazine in my editor's note by telling a story. So I've done that every issue for the last 4 or 5 years. I have, if it's a dramatic story, a dramatic cover story, I try to tell something a little scary that happened. Oftentimes I'll tell stories about my family or my children. So that is the power of storytelling. And when I wrote that first story, that first editor's note about my father, I received probably 400 emails in the first week that magazine hit subscribers' mailboxes, with people either congratulating me, talking about their Reader's Digest, be careful with it. But mostly they were connecting with me, and they were so happy to have a face to start their magazine. I compare that to other roles, other magazines, where I'd just written the traditional editor's letter, and I'd hear my 3 favorite stories. And I'd spend 5 years at a magazine and get maybe 5, 6 emails every couple of months. And this has gone on, this connection with readers, because I tell a story. It's been one of the hallmarks of my time at the Digest, and I'm very proud of it. So that's the power of story, that's the power of magazines. And magazines, when they're at their best, are immersive because of that storytelling. So today I'm going to talk about, let's see, how are we going to do this? Okay, Reader's Digest and storytelling. And I think there's an interesting note here that Reader's Digest has one of the longest time spent of any magazine in our competitive set. People spend, I think the last MRI, 57 minutes with every issue of Reader's Digest. And part of that, the reason for that is because they come to us to read stories, and boy, do they remember them. So what is a story? I'm going to go through this very quickly, but I think it's interesting to remind ourselves what a story is. It doesn't have to be Once Upon a Time, although those are the best stories. They do have beginnings, middles, and ends. They can be about people or places. They can be about ideas or concepts, but if you connect emotionally, that is the key to a great story. Stories are powerful, and in many ways, they are the most powerful way you can send a message, teach somebody, get somebody to remember something. Stories can change an organization or a culture. Sam Walton, if you think about Walmart, part of the corporate culture that he developed was based on stories of Sam Walton, his 10-foot rule. You know, when he wanted to be president of his university, of his class at the University of Missouri, he decided, how can I meet these students? And so every time he would walk around campus, when somebody came within 10 feet of him, he would say something to them, introduce them. So he wanted to speak first. And by the time he had been at the university for a couple of months, almost everybody knew who Sam Walton was because of this 10-foot rule. And so he told that story over and over again at Walmart. And that became part of the corporate culture. And that's why they have the greeters at Walmart to this day. So they make things memorable, they provide meaning, and they build connections. At Reader's Digest, how do we find great stories? When I started at the magazine, when I brought in a new team, when I bring in junior editors, and they want to pitch stories in their section, or they have a beat that they're curating, I tell them that when I'm looking at their pitches and when I'm reading the hundreds of thousands of stories that are published every day and every month in media around the world and around the United States, it gets in Reader's Digest if I feel something. There are many stories that don't make me laugh or cry or sigh or shiver, or surprise me, or tell me something I didn't know or I didn't know I needed to know. But the ones that do are the ones, as DeWitt Wallace, our founder, would say, those are the ones of lasting interest. And that's what gets into each issue of Reader's Digest. Do I feel something? So here's just a little visual journey through some of the emotions that you can have when you read Reader's Digest. It's not all unicorns and rainbows and happiness, although we have an optimistic point of view. We are about family-friendly humor and knock-knock jokes. But if you talk to people about the Reader's Digest they grew up with, I've met many journalists who've said they learned to read, they learned to tell a good story by reading our dramas in real life. So being scared, being thrilled, dramas in real life are a important component of every issue of the magazine. And our feature well can have a wide variety of emotional notes and lengths and voices and packaging approaches, but every issue has a drama in real life. Another emotion that people want to feel is understood. And when I think of service journalism in particular, I like to, we do those fast 5 ways to microwave foods. We do those fast hits in the magazine because that's part of the mix. But when I want to do a longer story, when I want to open up Art of Living, when I want to tell a story about how to psychologically deal with an issue in your life, I look for pieces, or I assign a piece, that where people can see themselves in that story, in that situation. And then I find people who epitomize that moment or that challenge. And when siblings stopped speaking, this came into one of our editorial meetings. We just started talking about, it was the holiday time, and so many people, it's all about, these happy family reunions, but often there's a real polarization, or there's siblings who don't talk anymore. And I thought to myself, this is a wonderful story. It's a wonderful way. Not all of us many of us still speak to our siblings. My sister's one of my best friends. But the reaction to this story was so intense by the people who could see themselves in this piece. And within the piece, there were 3 examples of siblings who continued to not speak, and that was okay. That's how they healed, or they found a way to come back together. And so those readers who connected with this story felt understood. They saw themselves in the piece. People want to be surprised, and I think this is another part of particularly service journalism, lifestyle journalism. They want information, but the way to really get their attention is to surprise them, tell them something, tell them a secret, package it in terms of confessions, because that is, we find, the way that, particularly digitally and online and through social media, these are the stories that are most shared, and these are the stories that television likes. I'll go on the Today Show and talk about, in fact, Monday morning, I'm going to be on the Today Show talking about secrets your body won't tell you. What does my body not want me to know? People are dying to know. So it's a great way. It's a great emotional note to hit. But still, you want to tell stories. So I come from a health and fitness background. I was at Fitness Magazine for many years. And the most popular stories were the columns called How I Did It. So they wanted to know what to eat. They wanted to know the workout. But they also wanted to connect with a real person. How much did she weigh? What was her turning point when she decided to lose the weight? How did she do it? What are the benefits? So I can relate. I was surprised by the information, but I was told a story. Humor. People want to laugh. So few magazines, and so few women's magazines, I find, have the confidence and the grace, if you will, to have a sense of humor and to tell jokes. And I am proud of that part of the Reader's Digest brand heritage, because there is nothing wrong. I'm going to do a little bit of name dropping because it's the one name I can really, really drop. So we do, every 4 years, we do the Reader's Digest interview with the 2 presidential candidates. And so 4 years ago, I interviewed Governor Romney and President Obama, and I was in the Oval Office. I was so excited. And I kind of did that to the president. I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm in here. And in fact, I said to the president, my dad would be so proud if yeah. And President Obama said, well, I'll tell you something. Reader's Digest, when I was growing up, was part of my life too. And my grandfather would rip out the jokes from Reader's Digest magazine and leave them for me. And he said, so my grandfather is proud that I'm doing this interview too. So we connected over humor. People want to laugh, and it's okay if it's corny. People want to feel proud. I talked a little bit about this yesterday. They want to feel patriotic. This was a wonderful story. We had veterans tell short stories, give examples of when they felt proud, when they felt maybe a little uncomfortable, what people, when they returned home, for example, when people come up to them and say this, they feel happy. When they come up to them and say that, they feel unhappy or a little uncomfortable. And the fact that it was told through the lens of real veterans and their families, little short anecdotes, really connected with readers. I think photography is an interesting way to tell a story, but I don't think it tells a complete story. And we've done several pieces where we've asked photographers to show us what does wonder look like for you, and that's a good example. This cover sold very, very well. Does this follow any rule that you've ever heard? Like, what does it even mean? It has a feeling. I am going to be surprised and delighted by the world, by the earth. And so it was 20 pictures that photographers had chosen that said wonder to them, that filled them with wonder. And then the caption, the 100-word caption, told the story of that photo. Why, where was that photographer when he saw that's not even a whale, that's a dolphin, saw that dolphin go in, and how did he feel, and why did that photo fill him with wonder? And it's that background story that really connected with people. You know, sadness, grief. This was a piece in New York Magazine that I read on an airplane on the way back from a conference. I don't know how many people have read this piece. The day I started lying to Ruth, this is the story of a man who had cancer, an oncologist. He's a doctor, and his wife died of cancer, essentially. And it's the story of the day he decided to stop telling her exactly what the prognosis was. And it is just ripping your heart out. But you connect with it because so many of us are dealing with a family member who's sick, and so it takes you on that journey. You learn a lot. You connect with this gentleman. But we had a lot of discussion about, is this too sad for Reader's Digest? Is this too upsetting? Because I remember, and we decided it wasn't. It was very popular, and many people connected with it when it was in New York Magazine, and then again in Reader's Digest. But it reminded me of a piece that I almost ran when I first got to the Digest, and it was a piece that was in Popular Mechanics. Do you remember the flight that left South America? It was an Air France flight, and it just disappeared. It went down into the ocean. Well, Popular Mechanics had gotten a hold of the black box, and they ran the transcript of what happened in the cockpit of that flight, and it was riveting. So I was reading the story, and through my own lens of how is it making me feel something, and man, was I feeling something. It was so horrible. And my executive editor, one of my executive editors, Barbara O'Dare, came into my office, and she said, I think this isn't a Digest story. She had been there for many years before I had just arrived. This isn't a Digest story because there is nothing uplifting about this piece. You feel something, but at the end, everybody dies. And it's not of lasting interest. I can't take anything good away from this and live with it. It's going to live in my brain and in my heart forever. I'll never forget it. But it's not something that I wanted the Reader's Digest brand sort of associated with. So that's a good example of the brand Reader's Digest and how storytelling and emotion fit in or don't. Curious, what does my pet think, want me to do, not want me to do, won't tell me, one of our best-selling issues? Again, this is another drama in real life, tension. People want to feel tension. Although we sort of, in Reader's Digest, again, to my popular mechanics anecdote, at Reader's Digest, if somebody's hanging from a cliff and they're going to be okay. If the story, they're not going to fall to their death. So there's a little bit of a spoiler thing that always happens in Reader's Digest. But they also want to feel outraged. And this is something else that we do, and we've done very well. They want to get mad. They want to sit in judgment of people. They want to sit in judgment, however, of people who they don't like stories. They love to get mad at judges and lawyers and politicians. They don't like to get mad at real people. So we often will do corrupt judges, bad judges, and so outrage is an emotional note that we try to hit often. But mostly we try to make them feel good and inspired. Kindness of strangers, we talked about this cover yesterday, but this story is one of the most popular stories of last year with our readers. It is all UGC. I said in my editor's letter, tell me a story where you were surprised by some random act of kindness. Kindness happens all the time, but I wanted that surprising moment where somebody changed your life, or changed your day, or changed your moment, random acts of kindness. And we just put 50 true stories in the magazine, and we'll probably do this every couple of years. New cover approach, and not summer flowers in October. Okay, so I'm going to fly through this a little bit. Everyday Heroes and 100-word true stories are two of the most popular columns in Reader's Digest because they are short, and because they're everything that the brand stands for in terms of they're about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and they're also true. We talked about our troops telling all. We talked about the patriotism. True Stories is, I tried to tap into the popularity of this column. It started as a contest, and in a few moments I will read you one of the winning 100-word true stories. But we got so many entries in the contest that we decided not to do it once a year, but to do it every month and to have a rolling entry, tell us your true stories. And the more that we run this page in the magazine, the more entries we get. And it's become a huge traffic driver for us. And a lot of people, many people have true stories, and it's really hard to get it into 100 words. Reader's Digest often curates from itself. So this story ran in our international editions, and I found it, I think it was in the Thai edition, and I wanted to rerun it in the US edition, and so I did. This was part of budget cuts, actually, so I thought, well, let's curate from ourselves. We've got 46 editions all over the world, and much of the content comes from the US, but sometimes we have a little division that assigns international stories. And this was a story about Stephen Sumner, so it had run 4 years ago, and he's an amputee, and he found this, it's a wonderful way to alleviate the excruciating phantom pain that many amputees still experience. You just put a mirror up to the other leg or the other arm, and when the person sees the limb, there's something that's happening neurologically. When they see that limb, the pain goes away. So it is this super simple way to alleviate pain. So he rides his bicycle with his mirror all around any given country, Thailand in this case. And he is just a one-man show. And when it ran and he's self-funded, and and when it ran in international editions, he got all sorts of donations. And when it ran in the United States, all of a sudden he didn't know which issue it was going to rerun in. But when it ran, he called us and said his website was going out of control because all the Reader's Digest readers were donating to his cause and funding his. I think this is a story that my new friend actually ripped out and gave to one of her physicians at Yale. They love to learn about health, about alternative cures, about anything that can sort of improve their life, told through real people. And we're always looking for new ways to do that, and miracles that stun doctors. You got that surprise in there, was a big hit with our readers. Does anybody remember the miracle baby? This was a baby there was this huge mudslide in West Virginia, and it was the baby that was thrown up by the mother into the mudslide, and it survived. The whole family, most of the town died, but the baby survived, the miracle baby. Well, this is 35 years later, this is the miracle baby. So we ran a story about where is he now, and this has led to, he's got a mural painted for him, and all sorts of fan mail, and he started a blog. I love that our dog, he was an abused dog, he became a dog whisperer. They had healed this dog, a New Jersey chapter of the ASPCA, and had trained Tofu to sort of heal other dogs. So the dog who became the dog whisperer, and it changed. Being in Reader's Digest and telling his story changed his life. He was the cover dog of the ASPA calendar that year. I'm going to fly through Humans of New York and leave you with this story of Alfred Geeson. So this was in June 2014. This is one of the winning stories in our 100-word true stories. It's called Sing to Me. My grandfather had just been buried, and the grave was being filled in when, surprisingly, my dad began to sing Danny Boy. Later, he explained that it was family tradition to sing this song at our deceased parents' gravesides to sing them to sleep, and that when he and mother passed, I would be expected to do the same. Circumstances prevented my singing at mother's grave, but I did sing at my dad's. I now live in America and have no living children. I often wonder who will sing Danny Boy at my funeral, who will sing me to sleep. So this is one of 7 stories, true stories, that ran. And I received maybe 40 letters and 6 phone calls from Reader's Digest readers who connected with Alfred Geeson and who said things like, please let Mr. Geeson know that all he has to do is have someone contact me. These are people who they meant what they said. When the time comes, and I will fly to Georgia and sing at his funeral. If he is still childless at the time of his passing, I would be glad to sing him to sleep. So I told these stories, and I put this story and the reaction to it in my editor's letter a few months later of Reader's Digest. So thank you for your time. Oh, sure.
We have time for a question or two.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can you give us an idea of how you pay for stories, what the cost is, and particularly the history of how that may have changed?
Oh, boy. Yeah. Well, when DeWitt Wallace started the magazine, he just, called all these magazines and said, let me take your piece and I'll cut it down. They're like, sure. But then they realized, then he started making all this money. So now a publishing company said, whoa, we're going to charge you. So he started paying for pieces. Oh boy, it's changed through, we have a mix of curation and original articles. We pay what other magazines pay, $2 to $3 a word, or we write a lot in-house. And it depends on the publication. So we'll pay a blogger, we'll pay somebody who writes a joke on Twitter $50 to put their funny tweet as a filler in the magazine. But we'll also pay the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, much more. We also have to decide if we want online rights, because now if we buy all rights, many times we'll be charged an exorbitant amount, particularly if we want to curate something from the New Yorker. We have a high-profile writer. We often have to go through their agent. And for my Genius issue, I wanted to run a Malcolm Gladwell piece, and we paid $10,000 for that piece. And I had to work that into my budget. But there was no way I could pay for online rights for that as well. So that is, but believe me, that is an outlier. Most pieces, there's a magazine, I love science and medicine and psychology, and there's a magazine called New Scientist, and they refuse to, no matter if I find 50 words or 5,000 words, they're going to charge me $5,000. And there's nothing that's of such lasting interest that is worth that amount of my budget, which shrinks every 6 months. So, yes.
Your story of how to tell stories is fascinating, but I think about what you said yesterday, I guess it was, on what age cohort you're targeting with the magazine. I think about particular kinds of values, whether they're family values or personal values, that a lot of people over the years have developed by reading Reader's Digest. I look at your editorial perspective and I say, going back to millennials,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and it's one of the things in this new world when, if we had multi-million dollars for television ads, or if I had HGTV magazine, and I had a television network behind me, we could tell the world about Reader's Digest, and we could. So I've had to think of creative ways to do that. And there's an organization called The Moth. Is anybody familiar? Some of the students may have heard of The Moth. It's one of the world's premier live storytelling events. And they have this sort of Brooklyn coffee house hipster vibe to them. That they have story slams. So people get up and they tell a true story. It has to be true, no notes, it's not performance. And they're in 19 cities across the country. So I just cold called the artistic director and I said, we are storytelling sisters. And she's from Alabama. She's like, Reader's Digest. She was all starstruck that I'm calling her. I'm nervous because I'm calling The Moth. And it turns out I wanted to do a partnership with them because I wanted to get those people who were interacting with stories in a new way in coffee houses. These are millennials, right? I wanted to get them in the magazine into the Reader's Digest universe. I wanted to get the Moth's podcast on our site and all these things. And she wanted the validation of Reader's Digest. She says, we are not just Brooklyn coffee houses. In fact, stories are ageless. It's not about demographics. And in fact, when I look at the quality of stories around the country and around the world, they're in Australia and Britain too, the best stories are out of Louisville. The worst stories are out of LA, because people in LA, they come and they're all actors, and the stories aren't real. So we have a part. No money changed hands, but I said, okay, I'm going to give you a column in the magazine, and she's like, ooh. So every Moth show all year, all around the country, they are talking about how we have a column in Reader's Digest. So all those Moth audiences are reminded that Reader's Digest is still in business. And we are a sponsor of the Grand Slams in 19 cities over the course of the year. And so at the end, next issue, the July-August issue, is going to be the best stories in America. And it's going to be a story from each of the Moth shows. So you have to be creative. And when you talk about storytelling and stories, it's ageless. When my girls if we're on a vacation and they can't play a game, or the DS is out of batteries, they say, Mommy, tell me a story about your life. Daddy, tell me a story about your life. And there's been research that shows that parents who tell young children stories, family stories, how they overcame adversity, grandparents who share that family story in a true way that show how they overcame, that those children are more resilient, that if they connect to a story about their own past and their own history, it benefits them in any number of ways. So I could go on, and I am going on and on.